Just use me.
Yeah. Well, here we are after a sweaty evening of tennis. Last evening, or last time rather, I told you that we would be talking about ministry. And I said to be thinking about that in our context of living your lives like you mean it. And it again is one of the spiritual stones of living like you mean it. And this basically is my way of giving back to you an opportunity to possibly help you live your life like you mean it by talking with others and sharing moments with you about the 5 spiritual stones. So far we've done discipleship, we've done fellowship, and now we're going to talk about ministry. And I told you last time that I was going to seek out a special friend, and my friend is with me this evening. He's like a brother to me, and I just got through whipping his butt in tennis. But no, seriously, we had fun.
Yeah, it was seriously.
We had a good time. It's my good friend, Greg Ott. And Greg, I'd like for you to answer the question or talk about, well, first of all, let me tell you that Greg is an ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And he's had churchurs in Kentucky and in Virginia, Kentucky and Virginia, and currently is a new church start leader in the capital area of the Christian Church, which is the Northern Virginia, Washington D.C. area. So I thought I would seek out his expertise and ask him what ministry means to him in the context of the whole living your life like you mean it idea. What would you say about that, Greg?
Well, to me, ministry is a verb. It's action. It's not just being able to memorize and recite scripture or saying the right thing. I'm not saying the right thing, but using someone else's words in response.
Right.
To me, ministry is an action word. And so in order to be a Jesus follower and to do ministry means that every moment of your life you are making the people around you, building them up, making them feel accepted, doing the things that are Christ-like, doing the things that Jesus did. Jesus drew crowds because everyone was accepted. Jesus' ministry was not, there's a time to be firm, there's a time to be lackadaisy, there's a time to sleep, and there's a time to work.
Right.
But everything that Jesus did was for the good of the community, for the good of those that he was with. And the challenge, I think, for ministry in the 21st century is that our neighborhood is global. So it's not just, the story of the Good Samaritan in the context of this little village.
Right.
We are now...
It's a big village.
It is a big village. So what we do here, makes a difference in other parts of this world. And so I think, I to define ministry has to have action. And likewise, I think ministry, Jesus didn't do it all by himself. If you really look at the scriptures, Jesus, well, first off, he had the disciples who, whether you, depending on which side of the theological coin you are, whether they ever got it or not, but that didn't stop Jesus from having Peter do things and to have these followers, and not to mention all the followers that were not identified in the scriptures. So and I think there are people who do ministry and don't recognize it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about in our men's group is what does it mean to be a creation of God? If God truly breathed God's breath into each one of us, we all have Spirit of
The
God in
Spirit
us.
of God in us.
Whether we admit it, recognize it, or use it to the good of the community, again, in our context, global community,
Right.
is where the faith issue comes in. And I see people do ministry all the time, and they go, "Oh, that's not ministry. I just, baked. I just took something over to my neighbor because she broke her hip."
Right.
No, that's ministry.
That's ministry.
I just think that we need to stop being afraid of calling it what it is.
Exactly.
And so
why do you think that is? Why do you think people are afraid to go down that path and not want to recognize that it is a ministry? What makes them uncomfortable, do you think?
Well, I don't know if I can speak for everyone that has that's challenged with that, but in the world of science and financial stability,
Mm-hmm.
we seem to be able to, some of us believe we can create our own destiny. And so that's when the human becomes the creator and the God becomes the observer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a dangerous place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I don't know if it's a fear. I mean, I've even mentioned to people, I say, "You just did a ministry," and they'll go, "Oh, I didn't really see it that way."
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Well, you think they get hung up on the fact
that
they see ministry as a, in quotes, religious thing? Is it?
I think that's part of it, because religion is not. There's still a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And we, at least in our culture, in our society in America, we need to blame someone or give someone credit. There is no middle ground.
Right.
And then we need to prove it.
Right.
And then we prove it until we can't prove it anymore.
Right.
It's like there is no mystery.
Right.
Because the mystery is to crack the case and find out who was in the purple room with the,
Yeah.
So it's like, we will indulge in things to death, and
So-
just the simple things passes by. I just think the simple things pass by, and we don't want to identify that.
Right.
I think it is. It could be. I think it could be a religious issue, especially if we, as a Christian, we follow Christ.
Right.
Okay, and so ministry to us, and the words, from a Christian perspective, is to be Christ-like.
Right.
Okay, so what is ministry to the Jewish brother and sister, to the Muslim brother and sister, to the other, so although they do use ministry in those contexts, it'd be interesting for you to talk to someone from another faith,
absolutely,
to just see what their feeling is on that. I really don't know why.
So how do you?
I mean, the ones who have no background whatsoever on what it means to be Christian aren't going to throw the word out ministry. I mean, part of the struggle, I think, that we have, which is not part of your question, but we're afraid to use the language. We're afraid to use God and Jesus language because it's not widely accepted in the secular society.
Yeah, it's not in the lexicon.
And then when it is used, it's used in a manner that is not the best for the community as a whole.
Right. And
I see that as, and yet it still gets defined by those folks that they're doing a ministry.
Right.
And I think we can be challenged. I think we can be encouraged But when you're belittling somebody, that's not ministry.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
If I'm a non-believer or a seeker who's curious about Christianity, and I hear or read some of the things that are not the best for the whole community, and I'm told that's what it means to be Christian, or
Right.
that's what it means to do ministry, I don't want to have a part of it either.
Right.
I am grounded, I feel, continually growing, but grounded enough to know that I can hear both sides and say, well, here's where I stand.
So how do we as Jesus followers, as Christians, how do we, when we encounter someone like you suggested, you know, the lady that's baking the cookies and taking them over to the neighbor, and you say, oh, well, that's a ministry, and they're reluctant to call it that, how do we get people to start accepting the language? How do we get them to understand it is what it is and be accepting of that? All the while accepting the fact, as you brought out, the fact that we do have other faiths amongst us
Sure.
that, you know, may look at it differently, but they still, I think, may, of course, they're going to have a different twist on it, but they're still going to call it what it is.
Sure. Well, I think that's the challenge. I mean, all four Gospels, let me take Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, every story for Jesus is a teaching moment. So if the neighbor doesn't understand what, say, well, I don't see this as a ministry, there's your teaching moment. There's your door. There's where there's true evangelism.
Right.
There's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, then you could even plant seeds, you know, the whole mustard seed thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to dwell on it over and over and over
Oh,
and over
absolutely.
again. Plant the seed, then when they come back and say, I want to hear more about that. I mean, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
that is the way it is. If you, and you know right when you say, well, you know, that's a real ministry. Thank you for doing it. I always thank the person. I go, well, thank you, because if we are Jesus followers, we are part of, we're disciples, students of Jesus, then we're thanking them on Jesus' behalf, right?
Absolutely.
So you know, it's not just that, you know, you're doing ministry,
Yeah.
and you say thank you for doing what you're doing, and you know,
You're
positive,
putting
you're doing positive, you're
putting that
exemplifying
Christ-like
what it means to be Jesus
into action.
Exactly. And so I think that's the beginning, and I think that's the journey that we have to take. We first off, not be afraid to identify it, then be careful with what you do. I mean, because in the world history, you know, religions have been used, and Christianity especially, in a negative way, and
Right.
you got people who hang on to that,
Right.
and you know, I think we've got to not be afraid to say, well, this is how I see it. You know, show them the Jesus you understand. If there's folks out there, or if there's organizations that bugs are starting to get on me, that portray Jesus differently than you, if you say nothing, they win.
That's a good point.
I mean, you know, one of the things I learned in seminary is you got to read every angle. You don't have to agree with every angle, but if you don't read it, you're not
Right.
informed.
And that's where telling your story
Sure,
comes into
absolutely.
play,
Absolutely.
which again is another part of the whole
Absolutely.
living your life like you mean it.
Yeah, well,
And-
you know, I've had people before say, well, that's not the Jesus I understand. Well, that's the one that I hold on to.
Yeah.
And they go, well, show me in the Bible. Or, you know, well, how come so-and-so? I can't speak for them. You got to remember we're speaking for ourselves.
Right.
But I mean, that's what makes a difference. You know, people say, you know, this person walks in a room and there's just a different tone. There's just a different atmosphere. You know, that's, and so why is that? I mean, you know, some people in our culture means they got an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
But just because it changed doesn't mean it's for a positive thing. What's more welcoming? What's more accepting? So, I think we need to not be afraid to make our claim, but to do it in a loving way, in a
and there again,
friendship way.
and there again, I think the fear of using the words and opening up to the ideas and talking about it, one-on-one with somebody, we forget that was the last thing that Jesus said, or one of the first things he said when he came out of the tomb was, "Don't be afraid."
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I really thank you, Greg, for sharing this time about ministry. I think in the future we're going to sit down and have a conversation about your life and how you live your life like you mean it. I've asked Greg to be one of our interviews, so this is kind of like a precursor to that. So this will give you kind of a taste of what that might be like in the coming journey that we're going on together. So
I'll take a shower before next
you take a shower before the next one. Okay. Well, thanks for watching and being here this evening on the tennis court as we get ready to go on about our way. Next week we're going to be talking about missions, and so I'd like for you to think about mission in the context of living your life like you mean it. And so I want to thank Greg again for being here with me this evening and coming out on the tennis court and having a good time and getting a little sweaty and doing a little bit of recreation and talking about ministry. So until next time, this is Ray Grider and Greg Ott saying thank you, and I hope you live your life like you mean it. God bless.
Blessings. Hey.